It's my pleasure to introduce Steve Fleegel and TJ Turnage. They'll be talking about using Google Colab for event reviews. We're going to also have some Western region participation from Steve Rogalski as well. And just let you know, the presentation is pinned in the comments, the chat. All right, go ahead, TJ.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining us. This is a topic that we're pretty excited about, and hopefully you feel the same way when we're done. So the topic is using Google Colab for event reviews. I will be teeing off the presentation, and then we'll have Western Region join us and introduce themselves, and then Steve will be going through a lot of examples here. So one thing to point out is we do have poll EV for survey questions. You should see the link there on the bottom right. And as already mentioned before, we have this presentation pinned in the comments, as well as the link to the Western Region code sharing site that we'll be referring to. So we encourage you to kind of play along, at least in the presentation, if you choose to do so. That might kind of help gel some ideas together a little bit better. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to kick it off with a poll. Looks like it's already kind of started. So here's the question, and very interested to get people's feedback on this. And Steve, you're driving, so just let me know when the answers have stopped coming in.
Sounds good. We'll give it maybe another few more seconds here. It looks like it's starting to settle down a little.
All right, so it's interesting. Looks like plurality there has got so-so. You've heard of it. That may have something to do with the fact that we have a fair number of Western Region folks on, as I'll talk about in a little bit. Western Region has kind of been blazing the trail a little bit more on Colab than maybe other parts of the Weather Service, and so that's why I really wanted to have them participate in this call. So outside of that, it looks like second place is what is Google Colab, and it's kind of nice to hear that, because I do feel like this is still not super common knowledge, and just hope to make it more and more visible to people. And I think once we go through this presentation, it'll be pretty clear what the advantages are. Okay, next slide, please. All right. Anyone who answers never, I'd like to have like a sidebar conversation. See if you are from this planet or not. Too many to count and frequently. Yes, that seems to be it. Occasionally. I think people do kind of get a system down after a while, so I'm not surprised to see a relatively high proportion there, but too many to count and frequently sort of seem to take the day here, and that isn't too surprising. It's a long-standing challenge to race against the clock and grab the data you want before it perishes and becomes exceedingly hard, if not impossible, to get after the fact. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so we kind of covered the first point here. Very often it's a mad rush to save off data before it disappears. And the next point I want to make is that if you're developing training or a case study, event review, anything like that, you may be diligent about getting the data, collecting it, but then maybe you can't find it or remember where you stashed it. And even if you do have the data, it's not always easy to display it, to render it. It's one thing to download raw data, another thing to make displays that are shareable and interpretable. The other thing too is you're sort of at the mercy of, if you are archiving off AWIPS, you're at the mercy of what you have in AWIPS. And a lot of us are pretty aggressive with filtering the data that comes in just to keep the performance going okay. And so as you'll see, Steve will go through some examples that reveal data sets that otherwise wouldn't be easily accessible or accessible at all in AWIPS. And that's what makes this kind of exciting, is you can kind of go beyond what you would normally expect to use for event reviews. And then the very last point I wanted to make, I touched upon this with somebody before the call started. Very often it falls on one person to be the data investigator. Maybe it requires certain, in the past anyway, it's often required specific skills to obtain the data and render it and do all those kind of things. But I think you'll find that what we're showing here is going to really level the playing field. And so you could almost have like a team or a group of subject matter experts that could really help with the data collection process and share the load. So that to me is pretty exciting as well. Next slide, please. All right, so what is Google Colab? Well, this is something that, as I mentioned before, Western Region has been a real pioneer on this. And a while back, I did a presentation about how you can visualize ArchiveGo's satellite data. And so these are a couple slides coming up here that are from that presentation. And this is just a quick introduction. The main thing I want to point out, though, is out of all this text here is that, first of all, on the bottom right, all you need is a Google account. All you need is an internet connection, and you don't necessarily need to know Python. And somebody very clearly pointed out that, I mean, honestly, knowing Python is even less of an issue given like ChatGPT and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy. But if you don't want to go down the learning Python path, you don't have to, because as you'll see in these notebooks, anyone can run them. It's just a matter of going through menu selections and that type of thing. At the bottom left, there's a YouTube presentation link that if you want to learn more about using Google Cloud, you can do so. Next slide, please. Now, the thing I pointed out in this original presentation was that NOAA has a ton of data sets. Just about any kind of observational data set you want is available on the web through this registry of open data on AWS. But since this presentation, it's kind of come to light that there are far more data sets available beyond the scope of NOAA. For example, there are other satellite data sets. There are model reanalysis data sets that aren't associated with NOAA, a lot of things. So I would first of all, though, encourage you to at least check out this website just to see what's available within NOAA. But I would also just be thinking as well about, well, what else exists beyond the scope of NOAA? And with Colab, it may be possible to tap into those data sources in a way we couldn't before. Next slide, please. Okay, at this point, I want to turn it over to Western Region headquarters, and just thank them in advance for collaborating with us so far. But perhaps they could provide a little bit of insight into how they were able to blaze the trail with Colab use and even focused training efforts. And it'll be kind of interesting to hear their timeline on that. So I'm going to turn it over to our Western Region contingent.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Steve Rogowski. I'm at Western Region headquarters, STID. And several years ago, I believe two and a half years ago, one of my former colleagues started playing with Google Colab, and he started putting together some shorter scripts that output beautiful graphics for archiving events. And the URL for this page is on the top of the screen. And when he left, my supervisor asked me to kind of shepherd the page forward. And so want to first thank Caleb Steele, who developed this page, and Mike Wessler, who just jumped on the call a few minutes ago. He's put a lot of work into these scripts as well. And so this page, as you see on the right, is basically just a listing of all of the notebooks. You generally get an image that shows you what some of the output from that particular script can get you. There's a link to the notebook underneath, of course, and a description. And the final thing I want to say is at the bottom, you have the contact. While I kind of oversee the page and add notebooks to the page for Recently, for example, I added numerous central region notebooks to this page. So I believe now we're somewhere around 31 notebooks that each do something distinctly different. Whether you're interested in NBM verification or satellite radar data, this page is growing pretty quickly, and we don't really know where this whole thing is going, but we do think central region for inquiring about combining efforts, and so we're happy to work with everybody. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really have enjoyed the collaboration so far, and my hope is we can further expand it into other regions, Eastern, Southern region. I know there's got to be a lot of good coders out there. I did see there might even be talk of setting up a Slack channel for NWS Python coders. So there's still a lot of potential for future growth, but this has been a really enjoyable start already. We'll go to the next slide, please. Very last thing I'll talk about before I turn it over to Steve is there are some limitations, as you might expect with any good thing. In the case of Google Colab, you are limited to 3 active scripts at one time. I personally don't find that a problem. I'm usually just running one at a time. The other, on the right side, there are some packages, basically libraries and things that you install that sometimes change, but that's pretty unusual. And then I'll turn your attention back to the left side where it says too many sessions. And you'll notice on the last sentence of that paragraph, it talks about something called Colab Pro. And so I'm just going to put in a really quick plug here about if Colab takes off like I suspect it's got potential to do, maybe something down the road is to see whether we can kind of get turbocharged versions of Colab that get rid of some of these limitations that we're seeing right here. But I guess that's for another day. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Steve Fleegel, and I think you'll be impressed with what he shows. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks TJ, and thanks Steve and Mike for all your kind of leading the way on this. And really that's what kind of drove my development of these scripts as I was using the Western region page, and you know, kind of a lot of the same stuff that TJ talked about there initially, where you know, I was spending a lot of time outside of work time to save off stuff just so I could get it saved, you know, collected and just grabbing tons of data. And I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way. So that's where a lot of this came from with my scripts, just to kind of develop new slide or new, you know, ways of grabbing that data and displaying it and in an easy use format so I can put it into event reviews. So, you know, this was one that I put together earlier this summer just to really, you know, kind of, I would go out and grab data from the MRMS Flash website. You know, they have a really good archive, but then discovered that, you know, they do have it all on AWS too. So I was like, well, this is a perfect opportunity to, you know, kind of build some of my skills and you know, make a nice little 4-panel that you can either run for a single image. You can create loops. It's all user selectable. The CREST unit streamflow is always the same, but you can change the ARI and the QPE FFG ratio and the QPE values if you want to look at 1 hour, 3 hour, you know, any of that type of stuff. And it also overlays some of the warnings and LSRs right on there. So, you know, you've used this in case reviews. Here's an example from a case review that I did earlier this summer, just to kind of highlight, you know, I just kind of set my times, what time I want to have that loop be created, adjust my domain, that type of thing, and then run it, and it populates everything in there for me. And the nice thing, and like TJ was kind of mentioning with the Colab, you know, you can just kind of set it and kind of that set it, forget it type thing, let it run, and it'll do everything for you. And then you can come back depending on how long some of these take, and you know, have your image created for you. Also kind of created an example. This is kind of a broader view, but looking at that Sioux Falls flooding event in the latter part of June, just to, you know, kind of show another example of ways that you can grab some of that data. And you can see here, you know, adjust it to be like the 6 hour ARI and QPE to FFG ratio and a longer duration QPE, just to show that as an example. But one of the, kind of earlier on things was, kind of being able to get some of the NBM percentile data, really to look into that. So got a Colab script here that will create a 6-panel of either the NBM snowfall or wind gust percentiles. Been using this a lot, especially with, the wind side of things, to really, as we've been making those different transitions to, NBM 4.2 with the most recent one. So again, you just define what time frame you want, what percentiles you want to show up in these 6-panel graphics. You can even display the deterministic wind gusts like I've got here. So you can just kind of see, what we would have had populated with our normal forecast builder process and what some of the different percentiles are. And then, like I said, it also works for snow. So here's just the different snow percentiles from a generally pretty big bust March snowfall event where we really didn't get as much as what any of the models were showing as it evolved. So, this is just another quick and easy way to grab that data, and go back and grab it, especially if it's exceeded that 14-day window in the What's Up viewer or the couple-day window that we have from the DESI graphics. And here's an example from earlier this year of how I used it in a case review. Really kind of, even though I created the 6-panel plot, I just kind of cropped off the other ones and, just focused on the higher end wind gust percentiles and compared it to the observations, and also tied in some DESI sounding data from the HREF just to help, kind of tie all those things in for things that the forecasters would be looking at. Another one I created, and this was driven by that kind of big bust event that we had back in March, just to take a look at where I can go back and grab all the Jeff's data, all the EC ensemble members, and then the NBM data and compare them and see how the percentiles compared. Because that was one of the things going into this event is like, was it something with the NBM QMD process and bias correction that influenced the precipitation and really kind of ramped up the precipitation. But looking at like even in this example, the 50th percentile from each one of those data sets, a lot of similarities. So it wasn't something that was really tied into the NBM side of things. It was more of the models as a whole really struggled with that event. But one of the things I do want to mention with this notebook is since it does have to download 80 members worth of data, it can take a little longer to run, especially if you're running it for some longer QPF accumulations. So just keep that in mind. That initial run takes some time, but then it's very flexible within the script. You just change what percentile you want to plot, and that is a matter of seconds to create those. So an initial run, longer run, and then it creates images really fast. This is probably one of the most robust scripts that or notebooks that I have. This one's really focused on the individual ensemble data. So whether it's the Jeffs or the EC ensemble that you want to plot, you can do 6-panel percentiles just like I showed from the NBM there earlier. But you can also do single panels or either of probability of exceedance or a single panel of 1 percentile if you wanted to do that. And you can create those postage stamps, 50 or 30 member postage stamps, just like you see on Weather Bell. And right now, this is only available for like QPF, upper level temperatures and snow depth, but it's very flexible to be able to adjust that to go a little bit broader or farther, expand upon that. And that's one of the things, like TJ, kind of highlight is, hopefully we can get more people that are interested in this and help expand a lot of these scripts, because, as long as the data is available on AWS, you're able to pull it in and plot it out. So I'll show you some examples of those different ones. We've already seen this 6-panel, but this all comes from that same script, just depending on what settings that you select. So here's, 850 temperatures, for that kind of bust event that we had. There's the QPF, but in this case is the Jeff's data. You can also see the single panel, like I mentioned, of the percentile data, the probability of exceeding, in this case, a 1/2 inch. But that's the really nice thing with the script. Once you have that data downloaded, you can run and create as many of these as you want. And there's just a little slider bar on the script that you just adjust it back and forth. If you want 1/4 inch, if you want 1 inch, whatever value you want, you can create those probability of exceedance from that ensemble member or that ensemble system. And then here's those postage stamps. So the Jeff's postage stamps from this case, just kind of highlighting, all the different members, and just helps you get that spatial view, for that event. In addition to those ensemble data, I also have a notebook that really looks at just the single model. So sometimes there's maybe certain things that you want to focus in on a single model. In this example, if you want to look at like some of the HER smoke data and go back into past days and look at events and see how well the HER smoke did, this script would work perfect for that. But it has data from the ECMWF, GFS, HER, and the RAP. A bunch of different upper level and surface data, things that you can plot. And again, it's very flexible to be built to view any other data. Probably the biggest difficulty, grabbing the data isn't too bad. It's just getting the color tables to match up with something either like our NWS type color tables or things that are visually appealing. So I find that to be the most difficult part of making any adjustments to these scripts. But just to show you some other examples, here's like the HER accumulated precipitation from that heavy rain event that I showed earlier from Sioux Falls' area. Here's a higher wind event or a wind advisory event that we had here recently, just a couple of weeks ago with the HER and the wind gust output, just to kind of see what the HER had. You can also plot out the upper level charts. So just again, things that can help me out in creating case reviews where I don't have to save off all that data right away. I can go and create these graphics as needed based off the story that I want to tell in the event review. So here's a couple of, I'll show a couple of examples here of using these single panels. We had an event back in April where we had some anvil level precipitation that was on the northern edge of convection that produced severe winds. And we've seen that several instances, recently, and I think it's been covered in a couple presentations. So I kind of digged into it. I'm like, well, I wonder if the HER captured it. And this script worked out perfectly to be able to grab that. The HER captured it, even output like what the max wind gusts. So it was showing some, 66, almost 67 knot gusts within that anvil level precipitation. So, thought that was a really neat application of this single panel. Used it for our Christmas storm last year where we had the warm nose pushed a lot farther west than what we were expecting. So I was able to apply, what we'd be looking at for some of the HER forecast to see where that's at. And you'll see in some future slides where I've used some sounding data or display sounding data from a notebook to apply, the radar data in combination with the model data to show where we can adjust the forecast. Also have this 4-panel synoptic, just to give you that synoptic overview. So that's really kind of drove the reason why I created this script. And all these two, you're very flexible with the domain. I've got a lot of domains set up, of course, to South Dakota and the Northern Plains. But each one of these, you do have a custom domain that you can go in there, put in your latitude, longitude of the box that you want to create, and create these same graphics. So it's very flexible for anyone if you don't want to save it off and make your own custom domains. But this one too is very flexible, where you can display different things, especially like 850 temperature. I've got winds on there as the image, but you can adjust that to be temperature advection or, those type of things. Same thing with the surface type of thing. So a lot of flexibility on these graphics. So here's an example, kind of going back to I used in a case review of that March bust event that we had where really the phasing of the stronger upper kind of northern stream shortwave just didn't happen like was initially forecast, and that really led to the differences in the forecast as it got closer to the event. So we got that example. Here's another one, just kind of taking that same data just to give kind of that larger scale synoptic overview for event review. This was from our Christmas storm last Christmas. And then this is a newer one, kind of developed. One of the big things that we're doing in the Northern Plains Sioux community is really kind of focusing on the forcing and what you would expect when you're looking at like the FGen or the temperature advection and that evolution, and what in turn the QPF should look like, what the radar should look like in those situations. So this is kind of a work in progress, but just wanted to highlight the ability to show kind of a 4-panel with some of the forcing parameters again, geared towards this area. But one of the things I want to do with this script is update it for more of the Western offices, because of course, 925 and 850 aren't going to work too well. So I want to get some flexibility in that script so you can change what you have these panels display if you want it to be 500 or 600, that type of thing. So that's, going to be something that'll be added to this script going forward. Shifting back to the MBM side of things, we've got this precipitation type and prob snow 4-panel graphics. So I use the precipitation type a lot now, especially in Central Region, with us making that transition to Forecast Builder and the MBM precipitation types. So allows you to just select your time, the MBM run, select the time that you want it to be valid for, and you can plot out those graphics. And then you also get the snowfall probabilities too. So you can grab that for any of the, any custom domain that you want to, or, any of the ones that are kind of pre-selected in there. And then same thing with the, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of highly customized ability for what data is shown in here. So for example, I've got the 4, 8, 12, and 18 inches, but if, you want to show any of the other MBM probabilities that are by default, you can adjust that in the script to be able to display those. So here's an example of how I used it in a case review for that Christmas storm, just to kind of show the evolution with time. So all these are valid at the same time, but just wanted to show the forecasters how the precipitation type forecast evolved as the models continue to push the warm nose farther and farther west, and led us to getting more and more of that mixed precipitation and even rain over the eastern part of the Aberdeen area. So that's one way to kind of utilize it. I also utilized it in the same case review where using some radar data, we were able to determine the rain, snow, or at least the mixed precipitation line was roughly here, and how that compared to the 1-hour forecast from the MBM. So you can see all the models really struggled with that warm nose. And so, again, tying in how we can make adjustments to that starting point to get the forecast more in line with what was happening or being observed out there. So at this point, I'm going to kind of just jump out of this presentation just to give a little bit of a Google Colab demo, just to kind of show how we get to the point of these graphics that I've been showing. So so one of the things that, like, when you open up any of the links from the code sharing page or from this presentation, it'll kind of bring you to this kind of default setup. One of the first things that I always kind of recommend people do is just kind of take a look through kind of some of the information here, just to get yourself familiar with what's going to be done with this script. But then after that, always just kind of run this very first play button. The big thing with Google Colab, everything's kind of hidden for you, so you can't see the code. If you're really interested in the code, you can click on the show code and you'll see all the different things that go into the script there. But we keep those hidden, so then that way it's very simple for you. You just hit the play button. So you always run that first play button, because that goes and grabs all the packages that TJ was mentioning earlier. It gets everything ready and ready to go. And so once that's done, in most cases, like this one, I ran it a little earlier, but it takes 45 seconds to maybe a minute at the most to get those packages installed. Then at that point, it's really just a matter of going through and making your selections. So I've kind of got this pre-filled out to create a graphic similar to what we saw before, but you just select what MBM model run you want to use. You can adjust the slider bar if you want to make any adjustments to that. So we'll leave it at that 0Z run. Then you select your forecast valid time, when you want that to be valid at, and then what type of data you want. So whether you, in this script just has the snow and the percentile data set up, so we'll keep it, or the gust percentile data set up, so we'll leave it on the gust. And then you can adjust what percentile you want displayed in the image, make any adjustments to your zoom. And this is where I mentioned, like, you can, all these scripts have customized zooms, so you can set your custom zoom in there, make adjustments to it, and then run it. But we'll just kind of, well, maybe we'll leave it on custom just so you can kind of see how that works. And then usually there'll be some additional map selections or adjustments that you can make. So for example, in this one, if you want the winds in knots or miles per hour, you can make that adjustment. When you've got everything set, you just go ahead and hit the play button. And that'll go out and you'll see it downloads that data. It grabs that really quick. So most of the processing part with this, and the script generally takes, maybe about 30 to 45 seconds or so to create the images, but most of that's just kind of processing the data in the background. So while we're waiting for that to run, the one thing I will mention, if you use any of these custom zooms, feel free to adjust it and just run it and see how it works. Sometimes you will see some larger gaps, or it may not look perfect, or you may want to just kind of adjust it a little bit. So these figure heights will adjust like how that image looks overall. But usually if you kind of keep more of like a landscape rectangle, these values will get you pretty close. So as you saw, the image kind of loaded up here down at the bottom. So now we've got that image and we've got the data from that event just a couple weeks ago. That's down for the Sioux Falls area, kind of focused in there. So again, overall, it took like 39 seconds to run. I'm pretty sure I probably couldn't go on WhatsApp Viewer and grab each one of those percentiles and get them saved off in that amount of time. So again, a time saver type of thing. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. Most of these are all pretty, you just want to hit the play button on them on the side, and that gives you what you want to do. I'm going to switch over to this one panel one. So here's one example. I started this up a little bit earlier. So it says, oh, you haven't run it for a little while. So, they kind of kick you off just to keep things from taking up too much of their resources. So if that happens, you can always hit reconnect. It'll connect up. As long as it hasn't been too long, usually you won't have to rerun this thing at the top. But I'm going to just run it here real quick just to make sure we don't run into any errors. And if it's already in good shape, it'll go through pretty quickly here. So, but while that's going, I'll just kind of show you, again, this is all the same setup. I'm just going to use the her data. This is going back to the derecho, May derecho that we had in South Dakota back in 2022. So I've got this set up with the her, and in these single panels, I've got a lot of different data. So you can see in here, I've got it categorized. Like if all the models have that data available, you can do that there. Anything that's not the ECMWF, here's some data that you can load. And we'll just kind of keep it in on the 1 kilometer reflectivity, which I've already got loaded down below. But so I'll just kind of scroll down there. You've got, again, you've got all these selections, but you can see how this kind of displayed out with where the her at this time had it located. An actual derecho location was probably somewhere around here. But if you want to look, okay, well, let's see what it looked like 6 hours later. Did the her do any better with its run? So we just adjust that start time. We'll leave all the end time the same. We'll hit the play button. I'll scroll down. This one's pretty quick just because it's one single data source. So you can see it grabs that data, goes through, and it should be almost done. I think this usually takes, maybe it's taking a little bit longer here. There it goes. So yeah, that took like 16 seconds to grab that data. Again, the actual location of the derecho was up in this area, so the her was way behind. The WASPs in this case actually did really well, but just a way to grab and different model data to see how well it did. But one thing I thought was really cool with this one, I'm just going to change this over to the wind gust because the her did, even though it had the location wrong, it did really well with the location of the wind gust. But so while that's processing here, again, we've got a lot of just different individual map type selections. So you can, as you're running any of these scripts or looking through them, you can, kind of ask you questions on what you want to do. And then you can make any selections there. So for this one here, I'm just going to open it into a new tab. This is something I like to do a lot too, just so it's easier to look at. So you just right click on the image, open a new tab, and you can see that image in the full extent. But I thought this one was really cool because even though the her was way off, it did a really good job of indicating the wind potential with that, and was forecasting 107 mile an hour wind gusts with that. Derecho is just off by probably 3 or 4 counties too far south. So and then one last thing I haven't mentioned yet, but all these scripts will save these images off too. So in addition to showing them here, so if you want to create multiple images, all you have to do is click over to this files button, and that will bring up essentially your file browser type of thing. And so you can, any of those images that you create, it creates a new file with the naming matching up with what your selections, and you just go ahead and click the 3 buttons and download that. And some of these where you do have, I guess I don't have it on this one, where you might run more images. So you have a whole lot of them that might take you to download. You'll have additional little Colab play buttons down here that will zip up all those files, so it makes it easier for downloading purposes. So with that, I guess maybe take a second and just see if there's any questions on using the Colab side of things before we jump into the last part of the presentation. See, Edward has a question, more of a Notebook Colab capability question. Does Colab support automation and direct publishing to a Google site, or more realistically, maybe even better, a Google Drive directory? And then, yeah, thank you for the compliment there on the scripts. Unfortunately, that's one of the bad parts, is with the Google Workspace, we are not allowed to have any Google Drive access. So it does have the button up there, but if you, because we're within the NOAA side of things, it doesn't allow that to sync up unless it's changed recently. But that was my last time I had checked. So, unfortunately, it doesn't allow for any of that. So that does make it a little more complicated. And then I think on that side of things, I'm not aware. TJ, are you aware of any sort of automation support for any of that?
There may be a way to do it with some of those higher tiers, because among other things, it'll let you, if you're paying enough, it'll allow you to just keep that Colab session open all the time, even in the background. And that would be pretty powerful. I'm sure it would be able to do kind of what you're describing in that case. But as it stands now with what we have, no, I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, that kind of matches up with what I remember seeing. And then Brett, you had asked a question about, downloading data and images and where it goes. Usually what I do is I'll download it to my laptop, and then, a lot of times just kind of either turn around and upload it right back to a Google Drive, or, occasionally maybe go on to like an external drive, that type of thing. But so unfortunately, because of the workspace being locked down, it's, it'd be nice if you could just have it automatically direct right into a Google Drive. But there is an added step to be able to, you have to download it and re-upload it. So, any other questions up in? And feel free to unmute or raise your hand if you have a question. Otherwise, we'll kind of move on to the second half of the presentation. Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
So in going through and kind of running one, I saw there was a button that said NWS logo. It looks like, from the way I see it, is the difference is down at the right, down on the right when you look at the column, there's a image by Stephen Fleegel versus image by National Weather Service. Is that something that you'd be potentially interested, or we would be able to actually put an actual NWS logo on as opposed to just text?
Yeah, that could be something. Yeah, I think we should be able to do that. I had just kind of set it up initially for my name when I was kind of creating all these, and then at the last second, I was like, oh, it'd be good to at least put some credit in there for the NWS in case it's used outside of internal use. But yeah, that would be I would think, be pretty easy adjustment to be able to make that have a logo in there.
Okay, because I could see, applications of doing something like that for purposes of like a DSS brief or something. Especially if you're remote, it allows you to grab the data faster.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. I am writing that down. I'll put that on my to-do list to get that added. Thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, that was a great suggestion, and it is doable.
Any other questions? Oh, good question, Brett. Brett had asked, you only mentioned Raptor, GFS, EC, MWF models. Are there others available, like the NAM, high-res, etc.? The NAM and the high-res WRF runs are on AWS. Right now I'm using the Herbie package to grab that data from AWS. And at this time, the Herbie only works with the latest current runs of the NAM and the high-res, or at least the last day or so, because it pulls it from the INSEP server. So one of the things that's on my to-do list is to work with the Herbie developers, and he's been really responsive, and I helped out to get some more MBM data, especially all the QMD data. So I'm planning on reaching out to him and probably kind of coding up what needs to be done to be able to pull that data from the AWS. And then at that point, I'll be able to add in the NAM and the high-res models into these scripts too. So that's definitely something that I want to do, and kind of a thing that's missing at this point. So good question, Brett. Cool. Well, with us being at about 40 after, let's kind of jump back into the presentation again here, and then we'll open up for questions at the end too, if anything else kind of pops up here. So kind of the second half of this presentation is more focused on some more of the observational data for case reviews, and this is. The rest of these are kind of a combination of myself, TJ, Scott Thomas, who's one of forecasters at the Grand Rapids office, and Western Region scripts. So we'll just kind of run through these here. So Sounder PY, this is one you may have seen or heard the Sounder PY website, but there's this Python package that allows you to essentially plot buff kit, upper air, wrap, and even ECMWF reanalysis soundings for a location. So one of the advantages to this notebook or Google Colab notebook is it does allow you to access that ECMWF reanalysis data as long as you have an API key. And so we've got some information on there. I'll be updating that information because the ECMWF is updating their APIs on tomorrow. And right now there's actually a little bug in the Sounder PY where it's not working properly with that new API. So there are a few things that need to be fixed if you're wanting to use the EC reanalysis data. But once that gets fixed, and it sounds like it'll be here pretty soon, I'll get that script updated so you're able to pull from there. So I've got an example where I used the ECMWF reanalysis for one of our case reviews, where it just kind of pulled that data in. So it allows you to, the script allows you to put in a lat long, you can put in your, like an ASOS site ID, and it'll pull the data for that location. So that's really slick. And even if you don't want to use the ECMWF, you can use the wrap reanalysis data to, pick any of those lat longs to be able to plot the sounding data. And one of the cool things is if you do run this within 30 days of an event, it'll even go out and put the radar data on there, which is pretty slick. Another advantage with this script and the program, the Sounder PY program, is you can just do photographs too. So I've got that as a selection in the notebook where, whether you want to do the full sounding or if you want to do a photograph, you can do that. So this is an example from the time a hail event, but then the environment changed, so it's kind of really reinforcing how watching that photograph and how things are evolving to help kind of guide how our threats changed with this event. And then I also talked about earlier some of those cases where the MBM precipitation type was off, and so this was me kind of reinforcing both the the radar side of things and the SBC mesoanalyst data, but then using Sounder PY to grab some of that wrap analysis data at different locations just to reinforce that the models were really struggling in this event with where that warm nose was. So again, tying in that Sounder PY into a case review. And this one used for another case review for a tornado event that we had back in June. This was put together by Scott Thomas in Grand Rapids. He did an awesome job in creating this because it's essentially kind of doing the same thing as like the Autumn Sky webpage, but you don't have to go through all the process of like downloading the data and re-uploading it to the webpage and all that. He's got the script that will go through, grab all the NextRad data, plot it out. You just set your time and what radar, and it does everything for you. So really slick. Was able to use it again, like I said, in a case review. That was a storm that was pretty close to our radar. So I didn't have to make sure I was going and saving data off of that Autumn Sky webpage as it was happening. I was able to actually have more time to be able to do other things with this event. So I'll kind of summarize it, and TJ, feel free to jump in if there's anything that I missed. But TJ put together this notebook where it goes, and he did even a satellite book club on it, talking about the satellite data retriever. So really kind of allows you again to grab that data from whether it's visible imagery, different channels, even has all the RGBs in there that you can create both single images and animated GIFs. So again, a really powerful tool to be able to grab all that data quickly and easily and save it off and be able to use it in your event reviews. So anything you wanted to touch on, TJ, or good for me to keep going?
No, not really. I do plan to add GLM and 1 minute data later, so stay tuned for that.
Yeah, GLM would be awesome to add in there. To me, that's one of the ones that's always a big struggle to be able to get a good archive before it either drops off of AWIPS or you can, kind of grab that from the College of DuPage is usually my go-to if I can get it within that, day or two window that the College of DuPage still has it. So that would be really exciting to have in there. Scott Thomas put this one together. This one now is kind of always my go-to for like starting off any summertime convection case reviews, just to give a nice summary of the warnings and all the LSRs that you had across the area. So really slick script to be able to do that. You just kind of put in your times and it outputs it out. And so when he had created this, it like kind of triggered me. I was like, hey, this is kind of something that maybe I can modify this to work with some of the other scripts that are available. So Western Region had this MRMS script that has the MRMS mesh tracks, or you can do rotation tracks and it overlays the LSRs. And I was like, wouldn't it be great to have the warnings on top of that mesh data and the LSR information? So I modified that, again, kind of touching on like taking this and bring it to the next level. So I just modified that to be able to put the warnings right on top of that and be able to display all that. So it works out really well for any sort of if we get just purely a hail event is where I tend to use this a little bit more, but just kind of combining that. And then you can see an example here where I put it in a case review for one of our hail events, kind of comparing the WAFs data to the warnings that we issued there, and then the MRMS mesh tracks type of thing. So and then this next one, just kind of a data download. TJ put this together. You just put in your start and end times, what you want to download. But so it grabs all the data from the SBC Mesoanalyst archive. But one of the really cool things with this is, and one thing that I really like with it is he provides for each hour like an HTML file that makes it really easy to look through the data, because it's one thing to download it all and then you're just kind of like scrolling through image after image trying to figure out which one I want and to look at. So TJ's got this really nice web page where you just kind of go through and select which one you want to look at and it'll display it out. So that makes it really easy to look at that data that you download. And then TJ put this one together too, a nice radar mosaic. So you can either create still images or loops. This is from the Mountain City tornado that we had here last month up in north central part of South Dakota. So I just kind of created this for the presentation and also to throw into my event review for that event. But just kind of, a nice, easy way to get an overview of the radar data for an overall time period. And I know TJ's mentioned he's even used this to run during some of their ops briefings and that type of thing. So really slick, and it creates it pretty quickly. And then I think this is the last one that I've got here. This was one TJ also put together, and pretty impressive. We haven't had too many tornadoes up in South Dakota recently, or over the last couple of years. But recently we did have one, that Mountain City tornado I mentioned. But it's just a way to go and grab the DAT survey information, plotted into a GR2 custom place file that you can load into GR2. And so, I did that for that Mountain City tornado event. And, to me, I thought this was awesome to be able to really tie those two things in and, make it really helpful for the forecasters as we're looking back at previous events that we survey. So finally, just what's next? Definitely go out and try some of these Google Colab notebooks. We hope that the information we showed here really kind of piques your interest, and you'll have some usage of this these notebooks and the stuff we put together. And as I said before, hopefully this will also spark some interest in improving the stuff that we've developed to either fit your needs, or maybe it's something that we can work together to help improve these and get them going onto the Western and Central Region code sharing webpage. So we hope that you want to kind of work forward towards using more and more of the Google Colab environment, whether it's in some of the things that we shown here, but there's so much more that you can do outside of what we have shown to help out your operations and things that you're doing. So with that, I'm just going to give you one last poll here, just to kind of see. Hopefully we see a lot up in that 3, 4, 5 range as we're going as we see this poll kind of filling out. So that's a good start. So yeah, it's been a really exciting process for me, as we've been, doing more and more into the Google Colab environment. Is so powerful, of the things that you can do. And I don't know if it was mentioned before, but, I mean, TJ kind of highlighted that, all you need is like internet connection and access to it. Like, honestly, I run this on my iPads. Once you have the script set up, you can pull it up on the iPad and run it and see the output, which, I know Robert kind of mentioned that about getting out to DSS type events. I mean, that might be a way that you can, utilize some of this type of stuff going forward. So, but yeah, looks like we've got some pretty good results there. Definitely going to use it. That's a really good sign. And so we'll kind of skip over to the next slide here, and just kind of give you our contact information. So, feel free to reach out to any of us, TJ or myself or Steve or Mike in Western Region. If you have any questions or that type of stuff, and like Steve had mentioned when he was showing off the Colab page or the code sharing page, if you have any issues with the scripts, feel free to reach out to that script contact. And if you're unable to get, in contact with them, feel free to reach out to us and we'll, be able to help you out. So with that, I'll just kind of open it up for any questions or comments or anything like that. So. Yeah, Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, if we wanted to make any tweaks to any of them, what's the best method? Because I couldn't imagine if we make edits to the one we have open, that would be for everybody, right?
Correct. Yeah. So most of these, I think, when they're shared, they're shared to either have viewer or comment access. So you can, like you said, you don't want to go in there and mess anything up. So what I've done for any of the ones from Western Region that I'm like, hey, I want to improve that one, you just go up here to the file menu and then save a copy in Drive. And that'll save it over to your Google Drive folder. And let's see. I don't know if I've got one up here. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. There we go. I'll just pull over my Google Drive folder. But within Google Drive, then there's this Colab Notebooks folder. And so it will save that. It'll say like copy of, whatever the name of that Colab script is. And so you can kind of see all the different ones. And then I use that and kind of sort things out depending on some of the other different Colab things that I've been working on. So you can see a ton of different ones I've been having here. So that's how I handle it, as I just kind of copy it off. Then you're welcome to, you can edit, modify, adjust the code, make improvements, that type of thing. So
Perfect. That's kind of what I thought, but I just wanted to double check. Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing or hearing anything. So with that, I don't know, TJ, if you had any departing words for everyone.
The only word I have is don't be intimidated. Give it a try, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised how easy it is. And if it isn't easy to you, no shame in that. Please reach out to any of us. I think once you start using it, you'll get comfortable with it very quickly and really see the benefits of it as well.
Yes, great presentation, guys. That's a powerful application. I could see a lot of use with that. I'd like to thank our presenters. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today, and that will end our presentation today. Thanks again.